So I wanted to give just a second there for everybody to do their handshakes and welcome each other on both sides of them and so forth. So welcome. Appreciate you being here today. One housekeeping item that I think is important based on size of the group, the way we have this set up for collaboration, we're using tabletop omnidirectional microphones. And so we've been asked to please not rustle papers any more than you have to, or eat potato chips. And so for our live streaming and that piece. So I wanted to make that comment as we move about. Welcome to our panel members and collaborators and those in the audience. We appreciate this. I'm excited for us to start this important process that we're embarking on. By the end of the process, we certainly hope that we've established pathways and created an educated and talented workforce, able not just to meet the needs of business and higher education, but are able to succeed in all post-secondary endeavors and in life. My son this morning started school. We took his annual picture beside the lamppost, and now at 6'3", he looks a whole lot different than he did at kindergarten, but he knew what we were meeting on this morning, and he said, "Dad, get us some pathways this morning." And I thought, that's a pretty simple comment, but pretty real, right? And that is going to be important to us. Many of our students struggle when they leave high school. They often aren't college and career ready. They'll go to college and need remedial courses. They may incur inordinate debt. And for not completing on time or at all. High school students are then ineligible for high-paying, high-demand jobs because they lack necessary skills, talent, credentials, those types of things. One of the reasons for this panel is a fundamental misalignment gap in some areas between the knowledge and skills of our students that are graduating and then what business, industry, higher education needs. That gap has then focused today's meeting on what do we need from our high school graduates, how can we best align what students learn and need with our business and higher ed communities. Thus, the focus of today's meeting with who we have as collaborators. These pathways must be accomplishable for our students in facilitating that transition from secondary and to post-secondary achievement. We also recognize that there are many pathways to success, and I think that's the key as we take on this endeavor, that there's many pathways that could be used for this. It does not have to be an and or. Can be many things. Bottom line, we want these pathways to serve as the culmination of a student's high school career, and we want to show them the true readiness, and we want to show business and industry, higher ed, true readiness of our students. So with that being said, what I would like to do first, and I'm typically not a person that takes time for this, because sometimes I think it just takes too long, but given that we were adding some panel members, doing some things at the end, we sent bios out, as you know, to the panel. I believe that's the best way to do those kinds of things. But due to the fact that we didn't get some of those out, I would like for us just to take a minute, it'll be more than a minute, to go around the table, just say who we are, who we represent. I think that would be important for the group, and I'll start that show and say that I'm Byron Ernest and on the state board and the chair, and then I'm going to go to my left just because Representative Baining, who is on this panel, called yesterday, and we knew he was going to have a problem with this first meeting because of some pre-arranged travel. he called me from Boston. He said, Byron, would you please, on my behalf, I don't get this very often, to be able to say something on the behalf of a representative, to say, really want to be there, want everybody to know that want to be an active part in this. And I said, who's coming in your place? He said, Representative Brown. And I said, you take as long as you want to in Boston, because I like working with this guy. So with that, I'll turn it to you.
Tim Brown, State Representative, Crawfordsville, Indiana, District 41, here for Representative Bainey. Thank you.
Good morning, Alan Taylor. I'm the Director of CTE District 45, which is in the southern part of the state in the New Albany area.
Jana Goebel, I'm the Director of College and Academic Services and Special Ed Coordinator for Irvington Community Schools on the east side of Indianapolis.
I'm Angie Crabtree. I work at Vincennes University, where I'm a professor and director of a program for students with learning disabilities. I'm on this panel as a parent.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Elsesser. I'm Executive Director of the Indiana Non-Public Education Association. I work with all the private schools in the state.
Marilyn Buck, Provost at Ball State University.
I'm Roy Weaver. I'm the Interim Dean of Teachers College at Ball State.
Sasha Teamy, Executive Director of Admissions for IU Bloomington.
Stephanie Wells.
John Newby, Assistant Vice President for K-12 Initiatives at Ivy Tech Community College.
I'm Janet Rummel, Ivy Tech Community College.
I'm Jason Cloth. I'm President and CEO of Ascend Indiana, which is part of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership.
I'm Susan Brock Williams, Director of Government Relations for Purdue University.
Good morning, Mitch Warren, Director of Admissions at Purdue in West Lafayette.
Good morning, Carol Auslander, Vice President of Education and Workforce Development for the Indiana Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, I'm Vanessa Johnson. I'm a Project Leadway Biomedical Science teacher at Perry Central Junior High School, and I'm here on panel as a teacher.
Bethany Shar, I'm with the Department of Workforce Development and Education and Training.
Good morning, Jason Beers, Senior Associate Commissioner at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education.
Good morning, Jennifer McCormick, State Superintendent and Chair of the State Board of Education.
Dennis Cruz, Indiana State Senator, District 14 in northeastern Indiana, covering Allen and DeKalb counties.
Good morning, DJ Watts, teacher at the Oakville Lindbergh School Corporation, and I serve on the State Board of Education.
Good morning, I'm Alicia Kumovich. I'm staff for the State Board of Education, working with Dr. Ernst on this panel.
Thank you. And so that brings us to the second thing on the agenda. And to do that, I would like to just point out over here in the windowsill, we have a good friend of mine and a, as you can see, super talented person over there. And you'll see our agenda. I like, and Mike has been helping me with this, because typically I do not like your normal agenda, because it sometimes is a little bit too structured for me. And those of you that know me know I like to be unstructured at times. But we have had our welcome, and we're on this pathway together, as you can see, and then we're going to work on our norms, just talk about our norms real quick. And to do that, I just wanted to say, square table, I know this is a little different for those, for some, I've had some say that to me, this is a little different structure. Really wanted this to be a convening of conversations, and really wanted us to have the conversations around pathways, have everyone at the table, and be able to do that. And as you saw from the structure of the multiple meetings, we will have different focuses on each meeting. Obviously, this one is business and higher ed, that we want to really have those conversations with. And also felt like it was very important that I wanted Mike as a collaborator with me on lots of things that we've done. Really wanted us to have some graphics of the work that we've done. And I think it will enable us, particularly at the end of this meeting where we begin to talk about values, we look at public comments, the things that he's able to take down, make graphics for us to be able to use. So I hope if you've not ever been exposed to that, hopefully this is something new for you that will be great, and I think you'll find value in us having that. And since Mike is over there, I wanted to give him 10 seconds, and Mike, 10 seconds just to give a little bit of him so that you know him. He's not just a person that can't talk over there. He is an actual, does a lot of work with World Economic Forum and those kinds of things. And so Mike, 10 seconds.
I asked for 5, so thank you for your generosity.
There you go.
I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm very glad to be here. I work with a lot of organizations internationally and in the United States, for-profit, non-profit, across all kinds of multi-stakeholder groups. Byron and I have been working together for 5 or 6 years. Honored to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. So again, as we said, we're looking forward to having these conversations, and I think it's important. I know a lot of you deal with norms and things that you work in, and I maybe need these reminders more than anything as to what good norms are for meetings. And I took a stab at a draft you have. It's the last page in your notebook prior to the tabs, as to some norms for this meeting, and I'm not going to read them all, but just what I have are assumed positive intentions. We all want what is best for our students, obviously. Take an inquiry stance. Ask questions. What led us to conclude where we're coming from with our perspective? Ground statements in evidence, timely responsiveness, communication, allowing for give and take. We are all not going to agree, and I would say that that's a good thing because that probably gets us to a better place. Address issues, not personalities, and respect the mountain. This is a big undertaking and an important undertaking, and like those that climb Mount Everest, we want to enjoy the climb. Not sure I would, but we want to enjoy the climb as we work through this. And so I would just open up for anyone who would like to add to this list of points. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to guess that everyone is comfortable with using these as our norms, and we will use those as we move forward. So the other thing I would say related to norms, and we're not to that point yet exactly, but I want to go ahead and bring that up. I believe that public comment is a very, very important part of this process. When we do public comment, that those individuals will be at the table. When they do that, we're going to allow 3 minutes for that. We're going to allow at each of these up to an hour for public comment, and we're going to be, I've asked Alicia to be the police on that and be strict on that, because we want as many people as we can. And in an hour, at 3 minutes, if I've done my math right, that's 20 individuals. So we want to be quick on that. And I would ask that, I think another thing that's best practice for public comment, let's use it as public comment, listen intently. Let's not engage into a conversation or a grilling of someone for public comment. Sometimes I feel like that when that's done. And so in respect for making sure that we get every person that wants to give public comment, let's make sure we use it as that and listen. And then I would say also to everyone out here or anyone, panel and collaborators, on the agenda is also we have a email address for this for comments to come in. It's gradpathways_comment at sboe.in.gov, and that is out there as well. So I think that's an important piece as we move forward, and we'll get to public comment here in just a few minutes. Then the next piece on here, I just wanted to, and again, you have this information, and I'm not going to read it, but I think it's important because I think sometimes we're not exactly all on the same page in terms of what the legislature has given us, and I think it's just really something that's important really quick to talk about. The legislature charged the state board in 1003 to take consultation with Department of Workforce Development, Commission on Higher Education, to develop these pathways for graduation. And that's straight from the language of that. This is a charge that we are taking as a state board, particularly with utmost pride and responsibility. I think that's, I've told people I think it's exciting when the legislature can put some faith in us to do that. Why are you smiling? And we are looking forward to this collaboration on that, and we're excited about that. There are some proposed pathways in the legislation, but it's important to recognize, and we bolded this in what we had sent out, it says may. So again, back to my earlier comment, it doesn't have to be and or. There can be whatever the possibilities are. And I would hope that we would approach this from an empty table, green hat thinking, whatever you want to say. Let's put it all on the table. And let's figure out, again, what's best for our children. So again, I want us to really take this from a lens of rigor and innovation. What's best for our students. So I would pause for a second here, just to we've done some introductory things. Does anyone have any questions, comments at this point before we go to public comment?
Question, Mr. Chairman. Do you want the collaborators to present in the public comment section, or just leave our comments for discussion?
Leave your comments for discussion. Okay. Thank you for asking that. I should have made that clear. Yes, absolutely. Anything else? Okay, with that, do you have the public comment?
I do. We have two.
And we have a chair set up for public comment right beside Susan there as well. And it looks like a public water sitting there as well. I'm not sure that idea, but there's one sitting there. If somebody believes that they need to do. We can switch those out if we need to. So call forth our first person.
Irma Lardell.
Good morning. Do I sit down, stand up, or what?
However you want to, or whatever is most comfortable for you. We wanted our public comment to have a seat at the table, but if you're comfortable standing, you do that.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to see everybody. Happy everybody made it here safe. One of the things that I wanted to ask was at the state board meeting, I know we were going to appoint some more people. And through introduction, and you guys did a great job, we couldn't really hear you that good back in the back. And this is such an important piece. I don't know if you have a microphone so that we can hear you. But I'd like to know, there was a component for parents. Who on this board is representing parents?
I am.
It'll be you. God bless you, and I look forward to talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our final comment is Mr. Bruce Watson.
I'm going to sit there. My name is Bruce Watson. I'm Director of Facilities for Fort Wayne Metals in Fort Wayne. I'm also one of the founders of the Gateway Coalition in Allen County. I'm advisor on Huntington North Learning Center and Steuben County Enterprise Center for Skills. I was asked to come up here by our groups to present the need in industry for skilled workforce. Don't know if you're familiar with Fort Wayne Metals. We're a supplier to the medical industry. We make mostly wire for medical devices. I'm sure somebody in here has some of our stuff in them. I do several, so not good. But we're a growing company. we grow 8 to 20% a year, and I have 14 facilities now, and I can't keep up. I can't hire people to maintain our growth. And it's not just me. I have my contractors, my electricians, my plumbers. There's no skills. There's nobody under 40 out there right now. And part of the problem we see is the alternative and skills are not being offered in the primary schools. When, in the old days, when we had junior high school, we had wood shop, metal shop, drafting, home ec. It was a short period to get people familiar with hands-on skills. We don't have that anymore. And all the public direction from state advertisement, school advertisement is go for a 4-year degree. 4-year degrees are great. I have several degrees right now, but I started out working maintenance, hands-on, and I've grown into that. Not everybody is needed for a degree, and right now I got 40 mostly engineering interns in, and they're great. They can do projects. They can't do anything practical. They can't build a machine. They can't repair a machine. They can't reprogram a machine. We need these skills to grow, and we've about drug out everything we can out of Northeast Indiana. Right now, I've been talking to South Carolina, Berkeley School District down there. They have, when they were bringing Boeing in, they promised to provide skill training for Boeing's workforce. They didn't, and Boeing pressured them. They got it in place. It's called Berkeley Metal College. It's more on the European German schedule where you take a career path through high school and you have a job. Like, that's what we need to do here. We need to get something like that in place, and I hope this group can do it, that we can get the individuals that either aren't college ready or aren't college ready yet into a career. My maintenance guy is going to be making $70,000, $80,000 a year, and I'm pushing for raises for him right now. So this is not a low-dollar, unskilled workforce. This is something significant for a career, and we wanted to impact everybody. This is very critical for economic growth, both in Northeast Indiana and in Indiana in general, and please take this seriously.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. That is it. Okay. That was public comment, and so we will move along. And we are working to see if there's any way we can take care of the microphone issue here now. So just wanted to know we did hear you on that, and we just need to use our teacher voices, outside voices, whatever you want to say, so that everyone out there can hear, and I'm sure that's not going to be a problem with me. So thank you for that public comment. Again, at each of these, we will be taking an hour's worth of public comment or whatever it takes, and so we appreciate that. Next, that brings us now to our discussion today that is our focus around higher education and our business community, which those comments related perfectly to. And the homework question that was sent to the group to think about was, how do we establish graduation pathways that are rigorous enough to create an educated and talented workforce, and how can we best align the pathways with what our businesses and higher education communities need? And wow, what better, no better segue into that than those public comments that we just had. So I would open this up for discussion of the group.
I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Watson just said. I was at a similar meeting with a different group on Tuesday night. They were executives of startup tech firms who have a vision that Indiana might become a Silicon Valley for the Midwest. And the same questions with a different group were difficulty of hiring people at entry level, and also keeping up with the competition for other firms on the East Coast and West Coast. And so the question was, the question I'm asking is, based on that discussion, whatever is created in terms of pathways, it seems to me there has to be a nimbleness a fluid way of approaching and being responsive in quick order, which I think are very difficult to accomplish when you're looking at traditional structures of organization and policies. So I don't have an answer for that. I wish it did. But that's my question as we think about pathways and looking at multiple ones. To what extent are we enhancing opportunities to grow the economy of Indiana? I think they ought to be linked. Whether it's for high school graduates, and these people were saying the other night, there's a small segment of people coming out of high schools that will serve them well. There aren't enough of them. There are a group of people who will come out of two-year Ivy Tech institutions and will serve them well. And then there will be people from four-year institutions. Tied into that, one person said 2 recent hires took a different flight home because they got a better offer while they were en route to Indiana. So again, I don't have a statement, but I think it's a critical question of tying what we do to growing the economy.
Dr. Ernst, if I could piggyback on that.
Absolutely.
In addition to what our public comment was all about, I really appreciate the fact that so far, even early in this discussion, we're talking about the importance of multiple pathways, understanding that we can't pigeonhole students into one particular pathway in which they'll earn their high school diploma and move on to post-secondary. I know Department of Ed is in the process of reviewing, getting ready to revise the career and tech ed pathways. I'm so glad that Alan is at the table representing career center directors from across the state, because I think that's really a key component to what this effort should be all about. There are definitely those students who need to be on that pathway that puts them into a 4-year program and baccalaureate ready, but let's not forget a large number of our students who need an alternative approach, and we need to recognize that that is as valuable as anything else that we have in the playbook.
In your opinion, if I could just ask a follow-up question to that, because I think that is, this is an important direction that we've gone here with this, and I told Alan I was going to work in the word porous at some point, because when you say fluid, I've always said, as an old CTE teacher, I always wanted, and Alan's heard me preach this in meetings, I want porous, because sometimes children don't know exactly, and we need to be able to, as you said, not get pigeonholed, right? So porous and pigeonhole goes together to me. So I'd like, if we could please, go down a little bit of the, how do we make sure that we're not? If we could just talk about that for a few minutes. What are some things that we can do that would keep us from that? Whether that's some thought process, whatever that is. And maybe it's just knowing we don't want to do that, but I think there's some, I saw a lot of head nodding going on as you all were making your comments. I think it would be important for us to maybe talk about that for a minute or two as to how we make sure that we don't do that.
I would just like to affirm and echo what you said. I had a conference call yesterday with a number of our secondary principals and guidance counselors, and their concern was just being very cautious that we didn't end up tracking folks in a way that they weren't able to move, you know. And so I think I love your fluidity, nimbleness, and responsiveness. I wrote those words down. I think that's a great way to describe it, you know. And I don't have an answer, but I'd say minimally that pathway needs to be reviewed annually to make sure that the student, you know, is in the correct place or where they believe they should be. We're talking, I was talking to Dr. Bess earlier before the meeting, we're talking about 14, 15-year-old kids, you know, being engaged in determining pathways. And so that fluidity part will be very, very important.
Now, to that, from our college standpoint, we see all the time students who come in and typically have as many as 3 majors. Someone to start with a particular major and finish with it doesn't happen very often. So even at that point, when they're older than the high school students, trying to make those decisions, they don't know exactly what they want. So I think the piece is to try to meet the needs of students, but if we make it too much down one particular path and not include enough to allow back and forth movement, we've limited individuals in ways that was not the intention. I think part of this, and this is the hard part, it's real easy to say, this is what they want to do, here's the path to get there. The problem is, if that was the only job they had for their entire career, we'd be fine. It's not going to be for any of us. So it gets down to how do we prepare them in a way that we're ready for that particular entry piece, but we've also provided them with the skills they need to be able to change and move forward into other paths and other opportunities that come forward. Even our public comment indicated he had done a variety of different things. We've got to make sure that they can do that and that we've developed a situation that's there. We'll have some that very specifically a college education is the direction that they need to go, and that to a certain extent is one of the easier directions to figure out, is to go, we'll head to there. It's some of the other pieces in between that become the major challenges.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree on the comment John made about tracking. We don't want to see that happen at an early age and not be able to get off that track. But to Marilyn's point, we also need very clear distinctions for students about what it means to take a career path versus a college path, whether that be a 2-year degree transferable to 4-year or military career training sort of path. So it's about explaining to our students clearly to them what should be expected for each of those.
I think I would also say too, regardless of the pathway, as you were saying, there needs to be an identification of the transferable skills that will make a student successful in a variety of careers, but then also college, to ensure that those are learned and mastered while they're participating in a pathway. The other thing I would say is that just because a student might enter the workforce immediately does not preclude them from then attaining a 4-year degree. So, there are multiple pathways to the 4-year degree as well. And so what can we do? I think stackable credentials are really important. I think exposing students to a variety of experiential learning while they're in middle school and high school and in college. I think that is critical in maintaining that fluidity and the ability to move from one career to another.
In my own experience, I was probably going to go to college as a high school student, but I still took home ec and shop and all those other things that now there might not be as much time in the day for, but it was so important to at least experience that in high school.
Janet, can you expand on the stackable credentials? Because I think that's an awesome thing. What could that look like with pathways?
Well, students, first of all, I think I might back up just a little bit. One of the things that we are working on at Ivy Tech is expanding beyond the traditional dual credit experience for students. 59,000 students in Indiana receive dual credit from Ivy Tech, but only 200 of them have done that in a way that corresponded to a certificate or technical certificate program that was designed in conjunction with employers, right, to really make them ready to enter the workforce. So rather than just sort of one-off dual credits where students might get their freshman English or college algebra, which is absolutely critical as well, looking at, with local industry, which of the programs, say at Ivy Tech or another institution, would prepare students to enter the workforce, if that's what they wish to do, immediately upon graduation. And so you could have a certificate program that might be 18 credit hours, which then all of those credits would transfer over to a technical certificate that a student could conceivably fairly easily earn while they're in high school, right? But then that technical certificate stacks to an associate degree, and then many of the associate degrees then transfer on to a 4-year institution, and then that way students can enter at multiple stages, knowing and feeling confident that, you know, these credits are worth something, and so is their job experience.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, I think when we look at what's happening in the labor market in Indiana, and we look at what's happening across the entire country, it's pretty clear that there will be some higher level of education required. DWD has that number. It's 62% of jobs will require post-secondary education. That could be a certificate, 2-year, 4-year degree. But when we look at central Indiana, only 42% of the working age adults have that level of educational attainment. So when you forecast out, you're 215,000 too few people with the education required to be able to meet the needs of employers. And that's creating significant income inequality, or income inequality will continue to grow, not only here, but throughout the country. And so then we ask ourselves, well, why is that happening? It's pretty clear that too few students that are coming out of high school are going on to enter into some kind of post-secondary education. If you look at Indianapolis public schools, that's 28,000 students. You know, over half will graduate from high school, but only half of those that graduate will go on to enroll in some post-secondary. And only about half of those are prepared for the rigor of a Purdue University entry-level English or algebra. Secondly, too few students are studying in fields that align to where jobs are. If you look at each of the major sectors in central Indiana, open jobs, and then you compare that to the completion of credentials, whether that's CTE, 2-year or 4-year, we don't produce anywhere near the number of credentials that would be required to fill those jobs. Third, too few are persisting through school, whether that's community college or 4-year institutions. And then finally, we're only capturing about half of Indiana college graduates in our labor market after they graduate from our public institutions. So then the question is, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? And I think both within the K-12 and the higher ed space, my view anyway, is that we need to do a better job of aggregating and understanding what it is that employers need. And that needs to be done at a client level. So go to One America, go to Roche and ask them, what are your 200 open jobs? What are they forecasted to be? What are the knowledge and skill requirements for those jobs? And then at the K-12 and higher ed level, we need to do a better job of connecting our students to those opportunities intentionally, in my view. So nudging them towards them. I think about my own experience in college. I went to the University of Illinois. I never met with a career service office during my time in college. And when you go out and you ask college students here in Indiana, name as many Indiana-based companies as you can in 5 minutes, you'd be shocked at how few companies our students know. So how do we, both at the high school level and at the post-secondary education level, make sure students are completing resumes, that we're capturing that information, that we're making that available to our employers so that they can find their way into a job. Third, I think when we don't have enough supply to keep up with demand, how can we direct public funding to build new supply of talent? So how can we be intentional about building talent pipelines? So we all talk about nursing or behavioral health right now as being huge shortages. Well, how are we going to overcome those through public policies and partnership with our higher education institutions to build a causally new supply of talent to fill those jobs? And then finally, how can we improve the allocation of public funding in a way that drives money to things that are going to lead people into the middle class, and that is going to lead to employers having what they need to grow and to grow our tax base. And so I think there needs to be a level of intentionality around this at both the K-12 level as well as the higher education level if we're going to get where we need to go. And right now we don't have the infrastructure required to do what I just articulated. And so I think being very deliberate about how we build that as quickly as we possibly can so that we can become the Silicon Valley of the Midwest, or the Midwest, I guess, you know, and not be kind of left behind, which I think a lot of post-industrial Midwestern cities are in jeopardy of seeing happen. Sorry, that was very long, I apologize.
Jason, I appreciate your comments. Since we have some universities at the table, I don't want to put you on the spot, so we don't have this information, you can give it to us. I'd be curious of the ones represented here today. What is your percentage of in-state undergrads?
Ours is 85% in-state.
You're all saying, right?
Yep. at Ball State. 74% of those stay in the state of Indiana for their jobs.
95 to 100.
Yeah, overall at Bloomington, it's nearly 60%.
60% are in state, and what is your projection, how many of those stay? You know?
I don't have that on.
Okay, thank you. Well, they're up
Oh,
down
we're about the same with IU. The incoming class is 53%, but
53
overall
state.
student body is closer to 60%.
Okay, did you know how many stay then? Do you know that percentage?
Stay in Indiana after how many years are you asking? I mean, we have some data, but it's hard to track them over
So you're saying
time.
50, tell me that again, 53 to 60%?
Around 60%, I can give you the exact figure, of total student body is in-state resident student. The incoming class is 53%. But we have increased our number of Hoosier students by 500 over the last 2 years, almost 3. Yeah.
Curious to know your thoughts on it. There's some states have caps on how many out-of-state you can take because of the issue of retaining the workforce and trying to keep them within the state. I'm just curious your thoughts from your level on that.
We haven't put a cap on it, but our focus and our recruitment is definitely on the Indiana students. I mean, that's the piece that we think that we wanted to be primarily serving. And I'll be candid in this regard. That becomes challenging in the financial situation that we're in at this point, because we get a lot more tuition dollars from the out-of-state students that then help cover the costs for some of, and that's a way to keep our tuition levels down for our in-state students, is by bringing in out-of-state students that are making up the difference. So when you ask all of those different issues, it makes it a bigger challenge. We would financially be better off if we took the step to go farther. We haven't chosen to do so. But it is one of the potential things that gets discussed every year as to whether or not to change that balance because of the financial factors that are involved.
And I would answer too with that our regional campus system, the percentages are much higher. So if you take the total pool of Indiana students applying to Purdue every year, we don't turn away that many Hoosier students. There's a spot for them in the Purdue system. And if they prove themselves that first year as a freshman, let's say at Purdue Northwest, they can apply to transfer to the West Lafayette campus. That happens often. So when you look at the total Purdue system, it's much different.
And the percentage of Indiana residents admitted to Purdue, the West Lafayette campus, is higher than the percentage of non-residents. And including that in the College of Engineering, we admit more Indiana students even into the College of Engineering, which is arguably the most competitive, than we do the non-residents.
Well, Mitch, I think, Carol, you're from the chamber, right?
Yes.
So you could probably speak to this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that in your Vision 2025 document that it mentioned that Indiana is the third largest provider of STEM degrees in the nation. We award the third highest, but we are 42nd in the nation of adults who have a STEM degree.
Right. So we're conferring a significant number of degrees, but they're either not staying there or we're not being able to provide them the jobs to stay in the state. Yeah, that's correct.
So Jason, back to your point, you're going to laugh here in a minute. So your infrastructure, and then when Susan was talking about the system, right? So that's I like that. If we were going to make you king for a day, Representative Brown would do emperor. I like king when we're in meetings, right? But if I were to make you king for a day with your comments that you made, where would these pathways fit in the because it would seem to me we're almost at a great point here where these pathways could be the beginning of that infrastructure. Does that make sense when I say, thanks for head nodding, some of you. What would that look like for you? Because obviously you've given us some thought. And anyone else that wants to jump in, because when you said system to that, it's like, wow, this could come together.
So, first of all, I would not want to be king for a day, because then I'd actually have the responsibility for being able to do it. But I think I think for me anyway, if we were able to aggregate and understand what our self-sustaining career paths. So ones that pay a good wage, like the wages that were described earlier. But I think, so if we could aggregate what that need is, and then say on the career and technical education side, let's align our standards for what is career net readiness to jobs that are good paying jobs. If within the community college system we could offer degrees that align to those same types of jobs, that would be another example. And then reward those institutions with public funding reward them with public funding for the types of credentials that are going to lead them into the middle class and that are going to be the ones that are in demand from employers. I think when it comes to community college and four-year colleges, I think I was a history and English major, and so it's sort of thank goodness for government. So I had an opportunity, but I think I think having the experience as a freshman or a sophomore in college of taking a course that is focused on career readiness, of writing a resume. I never wrote a resume in college until my senior year when I was getting ready to apply for a job. And I, looked online or I talked to family members about that. But having the opportunity to talk to someone as a freshman or sophomore in college about what career opportunities are available, and then writing a resume instead of a 3-page paper on Russian film in one class or something, and making that available to in a centralized way within the school system so that employers could access that information. I think it's just a very practical, not easy, but a practical step towards doing a better job of connecting people to employment opportunities. Those are just a few potential ideas.
Our Career Center actually is probably we'll be working with our students that are coming to campus next week. They start the instant they walk in the door. And they start talking to them about what their careers are going to be and how to go about that process of building the resume, how to write the resume. So some things have changed from the time frame that you were involved.
Yeah.
That becomes the initial focus is you've just gotten here and we want to help you figure out where it is that you're going when you get done. And make sure that you're on the path through the university that's going to get you there as quickly as possible. They start talking to them about the internships that are available and how they will help them find internships and the work, so that they get the work experience kinds of things that Ball State has as a piece that we really try to make sure that they get some experiential learning. So those things are happening, and we're not the only ones I know that are doing that, but that's the piece you're talking about from the university end is happening now. It's very much a spot where the students know where it is and are involved with it from the instant they walk in the door.
Cheryl, thank you.
I'm really glad to hear that, Dr. Barker, because I had a similar situation with Jason. I took a career course in my first semester of senior year only because I needed one credit class to finish early. And that was where I looked in the career. But at that point, it was too late. But going back to what Jason said, I think it's really important when we talked about having to be nimble and being flexible and having multiple pathways. I think that's really important. But adding to what Jason said, I think we need to have some structure and boundaries and alignment. I really like that term to employer fees, and I want to thank you for inviting me to sit on this panel, and many of us also here at the table representing employers, because we want to make sure that these students, whatever they graduate with, the skills that they have, it can be used as currency to get these high-paying, living wage, in-demand jobs. Because if we're graduating them with things that aren't going to be useful to employers, then they aren't going to get the jobs, and that's what we're hearing. I wanted to thank Mr. Watson, and I wanted to ask him that question. I wanted to ask him what skills are you looking for the 200 jobs that you are needing to fill right now, and those are some of the things that I appreciate, and the In-Chambers here and the IMA is here, and we're all shaking our heads, I think, at the same time when we're hearing some of you all speak. So I think it's important that we have the flexibility, especially in making sure that they are getting some of the core skills that they need, the soft skills, across all of the pathways, but making sure that we are aligning those to what the jobs are that are available in that area and in the state as well.
I know, I believe now we've got, wow, this is kind of cool now. We've got some sound now, and again, I apologize that we weren't exactly set up for that. If you feel the need to blame someone, please blame that on me and tweet that out. But now we've got microphones. If we can, we've got two of you down there in the corner, I know, just ready to make comments. If we could if you just want to take those mics off and flip them around, I know that's not the ideal world, but let's, we will make the best of what we've got.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Carol's comment. We talked a lot about flexibility for the student, which is obviously really critical, but I think flexibility of the schools to serve the private sector is equally important. So empowering our CTE directors and superintendents and principals to really be hyper responsive to the local needs of employers. There's just no way that we can make it so rigid that they can't respond to what the local folks like Mr. Watson need. So giving that same flexibility that we're focused onto the students to the ability to serve our business community was my big point. So keeping both of those pieces in mind equally are important.
Can I ask a question? To ask you a question, to see if we're on the same page.
It's on.
Sorry. Are you talking about regionally recognized certificates that the school, as far as grading pathways?
Yeah, I think regional certificates become important, but even as a regional level, that can even become difficult. So in local communities, we don't want to waste time. There's obviously very transferable skills that are important across the board, but when you're getting probably more specifically to hard skills, we don't want to spend our time necessarily training for a bunch of hard skills that aren't applicable in that local economy for that community that's trying to retain those kids and get them to work in their local employers. So probably more of the hard skills, whether that relates up to a regional certificate. In my experience with employers, is not always their biggest concern, and not necessarily that certificate. It's that really focused hard skills that apply to them walking in the door and being able to be productive.
And that, I agree with you, that makes my point. I think the needs that are in Fort Wayne versus Evansville versus Indianapolis versus Scottsburg are so different. Right. The least restrictive that we can be in these pathways, the more success I think we'll have.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure you'll agree, I mean, that's what the employers are looking for, to be able to really have a partnership that adds value. When those kids walk out of high school and are looking for a job, that's the connectivity that's going to make that value translate to the business owners and the business community.
Yeah. Just along that, I know in the manufacturing industry here in Indiana, the best training programs that our members are affiliated with are those in which the employers drive things like construction, work and learn opportunities, and curriculum. I can name one example with the ITEP program with IB Tech. The employers that participate in that program with IB Tech and the local CTEs and schools were 100% vetting the curriculum, the instruction, how the internships would work, and it is a fantastic program, and it's absolutely imperative that the employers be engaged in that level in order for any pathway to be ultimately useful to them. Yeah, and that's just one example.
A few comments. So just speaking back to the efforts for career services at the post-secondary level and the four-year degree path, at IU Bloomington as well, students are not only matched with an academic advisor, but a career advisor from the beginning. So that is an important piece. Channeling that to the secondary school environment, this is not the forum or the discussion for that, but as the committee considers pathways, also there could be an opportunity to provide a recommendation that our secondary school counselors are also provided with additional support, also with the directors that they're working with, so that they can have the tools they need to articulate the opportunities and the requirements to parents and families. They're incredibly over-leveraged right now with the number of students that they serve. And so on there are national averages, there are state averages, and these counselors are doing everything they can, especially in our lowest population counties. The counselors there are all the things. And so making sure that whatever pathways are articulated, that they have the tools and the language that they need as well. I also wanted to comment, our P16 Center and our School of Education at IU Bloomington is also partnering with workforce development opportunities in specifically the southern part of the state to make sure that we are connecting with corporations in those counties to develop internships for students where they get to go and connect with those on-site opportunities in those employment centers. And so it's been a really successful opportunity too. And if there can be the flexibility within the curriculum to allow for some of that time, students can discover those pathways and then also decide that they may want to pursue either four-year or workforce. One last point is the actual use of workforce readiness, that if there could be consideration for the optics of what that suggests, that we're seeing here that there is some need for still post-secondary study. We can get students as far as we can in the high school environment. I think that's wonderful to be ready for either choosing a major or choosing a career. But if we are saying workforce ready, that could send some sort of suggestion or expectation for our students and families that they may not need any post-secondary study. So just a consideration for a pathway.
I think as Jason said, we acknowledge that especially in manufacturing, as the technology advances, we will need everyone to have a post-secondary credential, certificate, associate degree, what have you. But perhaps not right away. And our members definitely want to help once they get into the plan. And they're wonderful about providing, sometimes in-plant training opportunities with our education partners, or we're providing tuition assistance programs. So we absolutely agree, but we don't know in all cases that they need to be there in order to enter. Yeah.
The data that I've seen regarding Indiana's graduation rate for post-secondary universities are somewhere around 55% to 65%, depending if it's a 4-year graduation rate or within 6 years. Our post-secondary reps, what do you attribute that graduation rate to, the dropout rate of the students that are entering but not completing?
Let me add one piece that fits into this that I think sometimes gets lost. Those graduation rates are those who enter as freshmen. And those are the only ones that are counted in those numbers. So they start with us as a freshman, here's the percent that graduate. The state also encourages lots of transfer. Doesn't take into effect that. If you use clearinghouse data for Ball State, for example, the students who started with us, 92 to 93% of them have graduated from somewhere. Not necessarily from us, but they did graduate. And I think sometimes those graduation rates get lost in thinking that those folks did not actually graduate from an institution. It just didn't graduate from that one. And I think that becomes a clear distinction that a lot of people don't understand. We can go, when we do the clearinghouses, we take each student's name one by one to find out where they are. And they've either graduated or still going to school at some point for 92 to 93% of them. So it's a whole different way to look at it than I think what is often looked at with that IPEDS data.
If I could say that in one second, first, just encourage, we encourage some of the data that's centered in this conversation already. For those of you who don't know, our commission puts out 3 reports that they speak to multiple questions that have been raised this morning. We do annual college reports that show where all our high school graduates go, in state, out of state, what they're studying, what their path is, they're pursuing, and what career they're ready. We have a completion report that shows where our students complete, on what time frame, those who start and finish the same campus, those who finish at different campus, different degree. And then finally, we have a return on investment report that shows of those students who graduate, are they employed, what's their earnings, and what degree they're lacking between their program study and their industry employment. So at the risk of overwhelming you with lots of information, perhaps we could share that data with you. It might help you structure this conversation.
I would just answer that by saying college is hard. It was hard for me. It's been hard for a long time, difficult subject matter, and the level is challenging. So as we talk about a college pathway, One thing that we like to see at Purdue, and I'm sure our colleagues would agree, is the most rigorous high school curriculum, the student can take. So if that's AP, dual credit, IB, advanced classes, the GPA, the curriculum that they experience in high school has a direct impact on their success in college. More so than a test score, it's the very top thing. So as we think about college pathways, always keep that in mind. The academic honors diploma is something that we want to see our students achieve in high school because the 4 years of math is there, et cetera. So that's what I would just add, and I would agree with Marilyn on the numbers. We have to look a little bit deeper into that. One thing I wanted to comment on is terminology, as Sasha said. We talk a lot about college and career ready. Really, we prefer it to be more college and career training ready. I mean, the student coming out of our high schools and then going on to college or going into the workforce, wherever they end up in a job someday, they're going to have to get further training for that job. So it's I know semantics, but we have to be set in our expectations about what the student can do coming out of any degree program. There has to be some further training there as well. So the more we can do with understanding the needs of the employer from a basic skill level, the better. We get frustrated sometimes in higher education because we're pointed to as saying, well, you're not doing enough to prepare the graduates to get into those jobs, but yet we don't know the specifics sometimes of what the employers want. So please continue to tell us. We have those relationships with employers all the time at Purdue and IU, Ball State, where we're talking to the employers, but we have to have specificity. Is there more that we can be doing? Tell us exactly what those skill sets are.
If I could just add to that, you're absolutely right, and that also goes for the K-12 system, that there needs to be a connection to the employer. When I travel the state speaking to employers, everywhere I go, we need more workers, we need more skilled workers, what can we do? We're struggling. My first question is, have you talked to your K-12 school district? And have you talked to the local higher ed institutions, and what connections can I help you make with those so that you can have those conversations so that we can better align the training at the K-12 level, at the higher ed level, so that they can help us help you. And, it has to be a symbiotic relationship, so I agree.
I wanted to address your question also, Alan, on graduation rates from Ivy Tech's perspective, and Janet may want to jump in because she's probably more familiar with the numbers than I am. But
John, they want you to use the mic.
I was trying to use my high school principal voice. Dr. Weaver. Thank you. The graduation rates for Ivy Tech is a 2-year institution. They look at 4 years out to determine what they are, and the numbers are not good. I mean, just to be blunt, we all want them to be better. It's also important to understand some of the factors that impact that. One of them, both Marilyn and I think Susan touched on, transfer. We have a number of students that transfer out before they complete anything, even a certificate or technical certificate with us. And so those students are lost in the calculations when they transfer from Ivy Tech to go to Ball State. We're happy they do if that's the pathway they need to follow, but that's one of the factors that impacts the rates that you see for us. Another factor is we have in our student body so many part-time students, and the calculations are typically based on students who are more full-time in nature, even though it'll go 4 years out to determine a degree completion for us. We have lots of students who are working full-time, a much higher percentage than some of my colleagues around the table. So that has an impact. The other thing that's important to remember, particularly when looking at our student body, is we have students who oftentimes have life issues get in the way, and they have every intention when they enroll to finish with a degree or certificate of some kind, but because of issues that they have to deal with outside their college experience, we'll lose them. And now we're doing lots of things to try to address those things that we can address. as far as keeping students involved, retaining them, getting them to a completion point. There have been so many initiatives over the last couple of years, and one of those is what we're trying to do with your programming, Alan, working with the career centers and starting our programs in the high school where students qualify for them. So I just wanted to give a little perspective from the Ivy Tech angle.
Yeah, and I would just say, we're at, 3% unemployment right now? We have students who will start with us, and they might earn their welding certification, for example, but they don't complete the full certificate or technical certificate or associate degree, but, they're snatched up immediately, which is good, but then that's another reason we try to work with employers so that we can continue to provide education to the incumbent workforce. One of the things that, another initiative that we are starting this school year is we will be the 3rd state in the nation to have a JAG College Success Program. And if you're familiar with JAG Indiana, it is extremely successful in high school. But one of the things we've noticed is that those students are no more successful in college than anyone else. So we will be doing a pilot in Indianapolis and Fort Wayne to have a JAG College and Career Coordinator. It will be sort of that intrusive and advising model, very career-driven, work-based learning experiences throughout that are career-aligned. When I was gathering baseline data for this project, one of the things I noticed, and it's confirmed with all of the data analysis we do as an institution, is that the type of degree is critical. And so there are certain degree programs that may not be aligned to high-demand, high-wage jobs, and we see the biggest dropout rate in those areas. When students are pursuing a degree that is aligned to a high-wage, high-demand occupation, particularly when there are internships and work-based learning experiences involved, our graduation rates in some cases, in some areas, are 100%. So it can make a difference, is all I'm saying.
And to follow back up, I appreciate all those responses, and the question was not critical at all. It actually, it came to my mind as a comment was made about the high schools and the high school counselors, because I think our secondary high schools can do, across our state, I think we can impact that graduation rate by doing a better job talking with our students early about careers and career pathways, and helping students match the training to their career goal. I think that impacts some of those numbers that we're talking about now. So it's a value system I think we have to guard against as we have these conversations also. That, and I'm interested in any thoughts on this also, the value of the career, so it's not this training path is the best. It goes back to stackable credentials. We want more training for all of our students, for your child, my child, everyone. But there's different ways and different paths to help our students, our parents, our communities, our state value all those careers. If we don't guard against saying this is better than this training path in our high schools, in our high school conversations, and in the way we put together our graduation pathway plan, it could be counterproductive. So I think part of this whole concept or conversation is about valuing all these careers, and so I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
So part of our role, we're a very small school. We only have 350 students, but we only have 2 counseling staff, so I am one of those people. And we do have those conversations. I think part of when we look at pathways, we also have to look at the students that we're servicing today. They're very different than our generation in that when I wasn't going into college, I chose a career path that I was passionate about. Kids today are choosing career paths that make money. That was into that. They want to see that instant gratification that they're so used to from their social life and media and all of that. They want to see that in their careers as well. I think also not just generational differences that we need to consider, but socioeconomic differences. We have a pretty diverse population in our building of socioeconomic status, and those conversations are very different depending on that background for our students. Our students who are more middle class and come from an educated family, they have that college background already kind of ingrained in them, or that I need to have a career, even if it's not college, if it's more of a technical trade or more skilled space. They understand that need. Some of our students who have only ever known poverty and their parents have only ever known poverty, helping them see that that isn't everyone's life and that doesn't have to be your life, and there are pathways that we can help you with, and is very difficult conversations. And I'm just the woman behind the desk who doesn't understand their life. So helping them to see that, and I think going back to providing counselors with the proper resources to be able to have those conversations. I think getting kids out into businesses, factories, wherever, having those job shadow opportunities so that they can actually see those careers at work is going to make a big impact in those conversations. So all of that kind of to say that as we look at pathways and the flexibility, I think that is really important. Not only because we have such a diverse population of people in Indiana and from region to region that's going to differ what those students look like, but they're also teenagers, so just developmentally, they change their minds a lot. And so being able to move from one pathway to the next as they go through college is important. And then kind of to one of your points about the discussions we're having, when I first started this position, we very much focused on where do you want to go to college? Where do you want to apply to college? What's your plan for college? Now when kids come, I mean, even in their freshman year, when we're looking at their schedule and their graduation plan, it's not as much a question of where do you want to go to college, although we do have that conversation. But the first question for me is always, what are your post-secondary plans? What do you want to do when you leave this place? Because that has to inform, if I'm not college bound, I always say you don't have to go to college, but you have to have a plan. Your parents don't want you living with them forever, so what are you going to do? And I think kind of focusing that as the starting point, and then asking that question several times a year because it's going to change as they have different experiences. That was kind of all over the place, but.
Could I jump back? Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
Could I jump back to where I began, to give it a kind of I like to use exaggeration as a way to make me think about something. What if, for example, we find out in 3 months from now that someone has developed an Xbox game, but it's the high school math curriculum, and parents are outraged they can't get their kids to go to bed at night because they're playing trigonometry, okay? And what if at the same time someone at a high school in Nevada says, we challenge you, we think our high school can get through algebra or the entire curriculum quicker than you can. And all of a sudden, across the nation, high schools are competing to see who can finish the entire high school curriculum the quickest. And then we discover that there's a school where all the high school students had finished all those courses in a month and a half. Okay? So what happens to our requirement that they have to have a semester of this, that, or the other? And in fact, you discover they in fact mastered it. What do we do then? So when I talk about fluidity and flexibility, that's the kind of bizarre, crazy thinking I think of. But is it really that improbable? And would we fight that? In other words, would we fight the fact that all of our students would excel quickly in 4 years of mathematics? And I'll put my citizen hat on now, not my institutional hat. Because would we fight that because it would take funds away from our institutions? Or would we think of another way of parlaying that into even greater excellence and accomplishment for our students? You can ask me to leave now if you'd like.
That's the kind of thinking in my view.
If I may add on to that piece as well a little bit, because I think this is what I understand that this panel is about, is thinking through this process. We've heard people indicate, specific skills that are needed in manufacturing and industry, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I also know that as little as a year from now, those skills change. And they're going to be changing, and they're changing much more rapidly, and the more we get into the tech fields, 20 years ago, I was told the computer I just bought was a year old because it takes a year to get it out there. Well, now it changes. In fact, I just heard a speaker from Google indicate that every 2 to 3 days they update Google. It's changing. Those skills are changing. And it gets back to something Susan said quite a bit ago, that we need people, probably one of the most important pieces. There are specific skills to be taught, and I don't suggest not to do that. But probably the most important one is the ability to change and to learn. And if we don't get them into a state that they know how to do that, and potentially put things in place that's going to help them to do that, then it really doesn't matter what direction they go, because they're soon going to become obsolete with what they know. And they're not going to fit into, they started out in the career doing just great, but if they can't learn to change and new skills, then they're not going to be able to continue to keep even the job that they've gotten. And they were valuable at one point, they're no longer valuable. That, to me, is probably one of the biggest pieces that has to come through in these pathways, is to make sure that we've taught them how to learn and how to continue to learn. And the idea would be that they have a desire to continue to learn, whatever direction, whatever it is the job that they want. We need people in all levels of the workforce. They're extremely valuable. A couple of years ago, I was in a taxi cab and he said, I'm not successful. I said, what do you mean you're not successful? Well, one brother's a doctor and the other brother's a lawyer, and I'm just a taxi cab driver in Washington, D.C. I said, you're sure doing that well, because I'm appreciating the way in which you've been doing a nice job of maneuvering through this traffic. What do you mean you're not successful? Are you taking care of your family and doing the things that are important? You're no less successful than they are if you do your job and you do it well. And I think sometimes we have to keep that in mind in terms of the value of what it is that people do. But we all have to be able to change and to learn, or whatever we do is going to be obsolete very, very soon.
Mr. Chairman, I would respond to Dr. Weaver's, that's an amazing, thing to think about. And what you're talking about there, it sounds like competency-based kind of model, which Purdue is experimenting with it right now with the degree program we have. But it has to be tied to some set criteria or base of knowledge for success in college or life or career or whatever. So we always have to come back to what is the base set of skills that the student needs to have to move on to the next level. But wow, that would be really cool if that happened. My kids would be playing that game probably all night. I wish we could develop something like that.
Mr. Chairman, something I'd like to just bring up regarding all this discussion is the concern we have at the department that we're hearing from schools across Indiana, whether you're in a county, since we have half our counties that are, I do have a principal voice like our teacher for me, so I've heard this voice. With Indiana having half of our counties having a declining population, that adds to some of the concerns when we can say we're going to develop these great programs and we're going to have a welding program. And I hear Mr. Watson's concerns, and we're going to have, we're going to have training for welding, and we're going to have a lot of different pathways. We have to have instructors. So we've cut many of our programs because we don't have instructors. But I also went to Lilly, and I heard them say that many of their workers are going out and volunteering at IPS for reading, which is a great thing, but I need them to go teach physics, because we've just dropped half the physics programs across Indiana, which is not healthy. We need flexibility from employers to go into our schools and help teach. We do not have the teachers. We're also looking at workplace specialist licensing, because there are so many hoops that those folks have to jump through. You get them through year one, and you're like, hey, here's what you have to do in year two, and they're like, I'm out. And then your whole program goes away. So there's a lot to it that I'm glad we're having this conversation, which will hopefully trickle into, and I know it's being done in certain areas of Indiana. I know this is not a new idea, but there are a lot of areas in Indiana this is not being done, and we need some assistance finding those qualified folks who can teach coding, who can teach physics, who can teach welding. We need some help.
I'd like to speak to that.
That is an acknowledged, huge, critical issue in manufacturing. We had a high school who just lost a precision machining teacher. They're probably going to close the program. That's devastating. But when you have machine shops in the area that have a 50-person deficit, they cannot afford to donate a worker. It's awful. And so it's great that Lilly can do that, and we need more of the large employers to do that. But let's face it, in a lot of these areas, they are not that big. And that's going to be a huge economic trouble for them to try to partner. And so the IMA very much wants our employers to come and be part of the solution. But we need them to be incented to do so in some way so that they're made whole or helped to be made whole.
And I recognize it's
Yeah.
not easy from employers, so I'm
It's really
not
tough.
saying employers are being waxed about it at all.
No,
I know
yeah.
it's not easy, but on that front end, we're gonna pay for it one way or the other.
Absolutely.
So it's just something that is true and real across the state. I had emails from tons of schools that are saying, hey, we're dropping all science programs, because you're not a science teacher, and really you want. So we have a true crisis with the teaching part of it that is going to, if not even caught up yet.
Yeah.
So you think we're having issues now? I hate to tell you, I think there's a lot to come that we're very, very concerned about.
Our workforce committee believes that a good instructor in any manufacturing course in the high school is the most critical component. If curriculum and all those things become less important, a great instructor will teach them the skills and will get them into the plants and will get them the greatest opportunities. Absolutely.
Just to kind of piggyback on what Dr. McCormick has said, as I'm sending kids to college, I have very few that are choosing education, which is scary. And I don't know what you're experiencing at the university level, but I'm lucky if I have one student a year that graduates with the intention of going into education and their four-year degree.
So, a couple thoughts. The first gets at the manufacturing issue, but I'm going to look at it through a different lens, which is the lens of nursing. So right now you have lots of demand for nurses and a fairly fixed supply. And when you look at why that supply is fixed, it's clinical rotations, or there's not enough faculty because the faculty at the collegiate level might make less than what they would make actually working in the profession of nursing, for instance. And so you've got lots of demand, fixed supply, so you get lots of churn in the labor market, and every nurse that an institution like Community Health loses costs them between $40,000 and $60,000 to replace and to train in that sort of mandatory orientation that the employer is going to provide, which is a minimum of 10 weeks. So we at Ascend worked with Community and the University of Indianapolis over the course of 8 months. And what we did is build what's called the Nursing Academy, but basically Community recruits a non-traditional candidate to get their BSN. These are people who already have some level of education. And they actually pay for that individual to get that Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. UIndy confers the degree, but they drop the price of tuition because these students are actually doing some of their classroom instruction on site. They're taught by adjunct faculty who are actually full-time staff at Community Health. They take the orientation and they integrate that into the educational training that these individuals are going through. They're also part-time employees, and so they're able to kind of increase the time to productivity, which is how Community justifies the expenditure on the degree. And then they're required to stay at Community for 3 to 5 years when they graduate in return for that scholarship award. So what you've been able to do is create a program that's going to graduate 50 people per year, but basically it's the nurse comes out with no debt and a guaranteed place of employment, assuming they meet all the criteria. UIndy gets a new stream of revenue that doesn't have a significant effect on the bricks and mortar, and then Community ends up with nurses that are going to be staying there for 3 to 5 years, increased time to productivity, and they're going to save money on the exchange. So I think there needs to be a mechanism for doing this, whether it's in manufacturing or in healthcare or in IT, where we can work much more constructively and much more nimbly or quickly between employers and higher education institutions to find creative ways to uptick the supply in areas where we're not producing enough people with specific knowledge and skills. So that was speaking to that. Then the second question I just wanted to ask, and it's something that has public policy impacts, I think both at the K-12 and at the higher ed level, which goes back to this career counseling concept, but I just looked on my phone. it was one counselor to 541 students in Indiana. And those counselors are responsible, if I'm not mistaken, for academic advising and scheduling, testing, social and emotional needs in a climate where we have increasing issues with drug abuse, substance abuse, career advising, college advising. So the question is, do we actually have enough? And are those people measured by the state for the things that are going to be of the greatest value for them, so they're not being distracted from the things that are going to lead them on one of the pathways we all want to see occur? So that's at the K-12 level. And then at the college level, I just wanted to ask Marilyn and Satya, when you put these systems in place to give this kind of career advising, are you seeing a change in the types of degrees that students are pursuing? Because one would assume that in a perfect market where all the information was being provided to a rational person, that person would choose a degree pathway that would lead them into that. So I was wondering if you've seen an uptick in fields that align to where there are going to be good middle class and beyond jobs. And then I would also be curious, like, how many students within these institutions actually have, if there's any information about how many have resumes or have completed a LinkedIn profile or, have basically put their information out there so that employers could easily access that information and try to connect those people to jobs. Sorry, that's another lot of questions.
I can't tell you in terms of what difference it's made in terms of, because we haven't asked the students those questions in quite that same way, I think, in terms of that process. We put everything out there. It still gets down to making choices. And if you were to look at it in terms of, and I'll go back to Jason's comment about what people are earning, so that return on investment of the degrees, if people were to look at some of those pieces, and this is part of, I think, why the teaching shortage is there. We're not going to have a high return on investment because we train a lot of teachers. If they were engineers, we have a higher return on investment because of what people get in those jobs that they have. So if the students, as we're hearing, and I don't doubt it, are saying they want high-paying jobs, they're not going to go into teaching, which is part of the issue that's there, because we don't value it enough to pay it to the level of importance in terms of what it needs to be. So, and students are making those choices. We are seeing the numbers of people in our teacher ed programs going down. It's a struggle, and a piece that we're trying to turn over and change in terms of what's there, but to be able to make a difference. But from the career end, they're given opportunities, they're out there, they're making themselves available. It still becomes student choice. We don't force them to say you have to have a resume. We don't force them to say you have to be signed up on LinkedIn and things of that sort. But we make sure that they're aware that the services are there, and it's done so not with the hope that you'll come to our spot on campus, but we'll go to you and give you every opportunity to become engaged in that process. They still have to, it's part of the education process, is for them to move forward. So I threw quite a few things into that response.
Part of my response is similar to Dr. We, as far as this, the outcomes piece and how it's influencing their majors, we don't have the data on how if they're going into particular majors. I don't have it today. But one thing that we are acknowledging is that a percentage of students come in every year with the major articulated of exploratory, over 800 students a year, and that's a percentage of our class. So that speaks to the need to acknowledge their flexibility, their exploration, and the fact that they're coming out of a secondary experience still deciding. And so one way that we address that is through a foundation or a core set of courses that allows them to be working towards graduation without knowing what's going to be on the diploma. And so as I think about that connection to the pathways opportunity, thinking about that flexibility that is allowed for students because of a foundation that allows them not to be tracked from the beginning, but allows them to be exploring all pathways from the beginning as their interests and their goals develop, and they're better able to articulate those. So the response to having a career advisor as part of that process is, as they're exploring, it shouldn't just be which one of the 4,000 courses do you want to explore, but what is your path that you want to be considering at that time. So it's been helpful in that regard.
You know, I'm seeing a little bit of a pause here at this moment, and I've seen some people need to take breaks. Please do that as you want to, because I'm kind of an unstructured break guy. Thank you. And Mike, now the world is your stage. If someone would hand him that mic, whatever the closest mic is, please.
Thanks.
Because we're said, please do use these. Again, I know it's a little inconvenient to pass around, but they're telling us that with live stream, the mics are making it great and they can hear. So let's do that.
Great, thank you. Is this working? Yes, can you hear me? No.
Does not sound like it.
Switch. Here's one. No. Thank you. Yep.
Pretty quickly going through the first section of really just kind of laying the groundwork. Dr. Ernest was saying that there's many pathways to success, and just recognizing the core, I guess, creative tension is this gap between the knowledge and skills of students and the knowledge and skills that business and higher education are looking for, and recognizing that there is kind of a gap there, and that we should be exploring many ways to be able to bridge those gaps, and what are the paths to be able to connect those two. Part of laying how we are going to work as a group of people, assuming positive intent, making sure we're taking a stance of inquiry, using evidence in our statements, timely responses, addressing the issues rather than the personalities, respect the mountain and the challenge that this represents. And let's make sure that we're bringing all options to the table. I think so far we've been adhering to that pretty well. Hearing public comment. First, yes, recognizing parents are represented here, that's good. And then hearing a specific story and the reality of what it looks like when a business is growing and does not have the workforce that it needs. So looking at a business that's growing 20%, looking for the young people with the hands-on skills for them to be able to grow. And literally that's their constraint right now. Recognizing that very often these skills were learned in primary school, like shop, home ec, and very often that capability has been lost. Started to move into what qualities might we be looking for in these pathways. And so you heard early on this responsiveness, nimbleness, and fluidity that I think a lot of people touched on, and recognize that any system that we have, any set of pathways has to be able to achieve those qualities, both in terms of itself as a system, in the ways that students might move through those, as well as how we're able to respond to communities and to higher education and to business. Recognizing the flip side of that point, also needing structure, alignment and boundaries. And so pathways without that structure are lost. And so what's the balance between those? The term of Silicon Valley and the Midwest is sort of a stretch goal. What would that look like? Recognizing that Indiana is number 3 in STEM degrees. Heard this point of transferable skills and experiential learning, things that reinforce each other. Looking for different ways to get to what that end goal might be. And you'll see in a minute that the discussion of what that end goal actually is became central. Recognizing that one thing we don't want to do is to track students down a path that they shouldn't be on. So how can we learn from those who are actually on the ground, who know this information? How can we connect students with the opportunities? What does it look like to walk the line between equity and employers and making sure that we're growing the middle class and giving the workforce what it needs? Also recognizing this question, what is career readiness? For example, what might it look like if we were to, as part of an education, look like what it needs to build a resume? It's recognized this is happening now in some places. I'll just say, this represents my shot at what a system might look like in some of the ways that I heard it being described. And so this system of pathways, connecting the student and all the forces around that. What does that look like in terms of getting to a place of employment, higher education, and recognizing that there's many lines in between these. And so what does that flexibility actually look like? How do you build that in? I heard college and career training ready, what that might be. What does it mean for us to value all careers? Recognizing for the MSBAC conversation that right now teachers and these instructors represent a very real crisis. And so this is a reinforcing loop. We need these teachers, we need the skills. That's something that just keeps building. What is success? What does it mean when you are, a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old trying to think about what you're going to be when you grow up? What does it mean for us to learn how to learn? What do those career goals look like at that age? What is college? What do they actually think they're trying to get to? What are the ways we can support that and make sure that this system responds to their needs as they change? Recognizing that connection too between higher education and employers, the need for clear communication and alignment between them. Also the regional differences and the fact that we have very good data in the system. How do we learn and how does that knowledge get transferred throughout? And also remembering that there's complexity to this. This whole system is in motion. So as we're designing, the whole thing continues to change. So how do you address that? Okay, that's a high-level overview. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I told you he was wicked talented, and I appreciate that. And also a couple of things. One, we will be putting those on the website and be posting those so that if anybody in the future wants to look at those, we can. And then Jason, we're also thinking to your comment of getting that data out as well to this group as a piece of the next time homework and so forth, so that we're looking at that as well. And so I would just, great discussion, and I've overheard a lot of people on the break talking about the great discussion, the openness, and wow, having the right people in the room, right, it is awesome. And so not having necessarily the right terminology here, I want to throw something out just for talk, because I think it's what we've been hearing and talking about, and Mike did a good job of pulling this together. So what does it look like? Part of what I'm hearing is some kind of, for lack of better words, so please don't, trash me on maybe using the wrong term, but some type of a credentialing that would be a part of pathways. What does that, thanks for nodding your heads again, because that helps me. So what would career credentialing look like? What could that look like, given, knowing that we've talked about some of the parameters, because Jennifer's comments are absolutely right? Like we can't go down the road that we can't service, and we know that. But it's also the task of this group to come up with what that should look like, and to begin to be, I guess to Jason's point from the other part, what can we do to be part of the start of an infrastructure as to what that looks like? So I guess I would just pose the question of what could career credentialing look like as a part of pathways to get us at some point to maybe start some discussion there.
Question, I guess, for you on that. My question would be, there are many career pathways, so are you talking about credentialing in various sort of larger subcategories like health sciences or, I don't know, social services? I don't know, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but I mean, there could be multiple credentialing within specific areas.
So the answer is, I think that we don't know at this point, or the sky would be the limit. What would that look like? Would it be broad area? And I think that's part of the discussion, right? Or from because we heard loud and clear the regional part of this, and I think we would all recognize that that's true. We could go to different counties and there'd be different things. So I think that's part of the not to tell you I don't know, but I think that's part of the discussion. Just how detailed do you get? How do we take into account the data that we've got and also take in the tension? I love the tension from the standpoint of what the data shows, but also what Alan spoke to of let's not discount a career that a student wants to go into as well. And I think that's what you said, Alan, as well. But we also know that the data from Janet says that if we're not in an area that's high wage, high demand, that may not end well either. So I think it's how do we make that tension work, right? And what could, you know, again, and maybe that's not even an idea, but it was a place that I thought we could start, given what I at least had been hearing in the earlier discussions, to what some type of credential could look like.
It might be helpful to do, and I don't want to overassume that everybody's familiar with the 12 CTE pathways that are already there. Everybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
Because I know we are revisiting those. When we did doing 6 at a time, we're also reviewing actually what those look like from the department end, but also access. Because it's one thing to have pathways, it's another thing. You get in parts of our state, the access is the issue. So I didn't want to overassume everybody realize that. So the department is tackling the first 6, and I know Alan, you can speak way more so than I can about this. The first 6, and then we'll tackle the second 6. But those may look different based upon the review and how all that shapes out. Hey, Alan, anything to add about you're the expert in that area?
No, I mean, pathways are just, there's many different definitions to what pathways are. And I think what you're referring to is our course offerings within the high school, trying to align those course offerings with that career option, which again, those pathways will take additional training. It's different training for different pathways, but that's why I go back to saying valuing all those pathways and those different training programs. But good point, and that's a very important work for us in the state also, is to constantly keep reviewing those pathways and updating them. But then you gotta, just because we have them on the books, it goes back to what you said, and as someone teach those, that's our big struggle, trying to find. We can offer lots of manufacturing courses, but if we don't have, one, students choosing them, because maybe it's a value system, how we're promoting that or selling that, and 2, we have teachers to teach it. So we can have them on the books, but there's still several.
And I recognize I'm looking at that in narrow lens, and career credentialing is much bigger than that, but I want to make sure that sliver, that people are aware of that. The other piece is, and Alan, you can probably speak better than I can about this as well, but we're concerned that the credentialing piece, our students aren't sometimes very successful on, they go through the program, but they can't pass those courses or the tests that are required to get the actual credentialing. So this practical issue where we're trying to get them out of the gate with something, our students struggle, and I don't have those percentages in front of me, and you may know that better, Alan, I'll put you on the spot, but we can get that to you, but we're not finding, and it's, depending on the area, some are a very low percentage of those students who can actually are successful on those exams. So they can do well in the program, the exams are pretty high.
Well, and I think what you're also referring to, there are so many certification exams, there's so many in each career, and so finding the right level. So CPR certification, probably not, it's nice, and it's, football students have a CPR certification, but that's not the level you want to assess students on. But then compare that to a Cisco networking certification, very high level. So it's finding the right certification at the right level. And then another challenge within the secondary world is the cost of those certifications are atrocious. Some are very, very costly. So a couple of things to think about.
Well, in the higher ed world, there's a term called meta-major. Jason can talk about that, and so maybe we can mirror up the meta-major categories with the career pathway categories and see kind of where that leaves us, so that students, if they kind of have an understanding if they want to work in healthcare someday, what's the pathway for that? What is it for information technology, for example? Yeah.
Yeah, as the student said, there's been this real movement in higher ed away from having students just select a very specific major rather than start with a very broad pathways, major interest areas, and things like that nature. The jargon really not important, but basically, just as it's overwhelming for a college student to pick from the how many hundreds of majors we have, I'm sure it's even more overwhelming for our high school students to make those kinds of decisions. I think what we're really talking about is not asking a high school student to pick a very specific career or job, rather being in narrow what's not right for them. And take all these pathways we're developing and aggregate them up into just a few academies, whatever we want to call them, so that students can begin to self-select and say, I know that stuff's not for me, I think this might be for me. But when we talk about flexibility, I think one thing we remember is that in order to have flexibility, we need to have intentionality. And we had such nationwide with such a diversion track that we've almost overcorrected to the point that we don't provide very coherent guidance at all. And so we have students who are either not making decisions or they're making decisions based upon misconceptions about what's best for them and even what the industry looks like. So if we can think about ways to, at a minimum, start exposing students to a broad array early on so they can, as they develop, they can start the narrowing process. So best case scenario, they have a very clear direction by the end of high school and some preparation and learning that goes along with that. Worst case scenario, I don't know if it's such a worst case scenario, they've at least drastically limited the number of things that are not appropriate for them. And they're better equipped for that selection process, whether it's going directly to the workforce or there's doing some sort of post-secondary education.
Just to piggyback on what Jason said, I 100% agree. We've been pretty rigid at times, but just know what schools are up against. I know when I was superintendent, I paid attention to this. There's a huge academic for honors diplomas, which I know other universities have to those, and I wanted to push the rigor as hard as you can push it. There's a financial gain for that. So if students receive that, you are looking at over $1,000 a student. That's quite an incentive that when you push someone in that direction, it's not as flexible as you think. Because it is pretty defined, it's hard for them to explore, it's hard for them to get exposed to some of the courses. They may say, you know, I'm kind of interested in welding, there's no way you're getting welding in. I mean, it's very difficult to do that. So that's where that flexibility piece, I've heard it several times, you have a financial incentive butting up against the flexibility versus what the workforce needs. So it's kind of there's several layers to this, but he's exactly right. We've been pretty rigid with some of it, defining those diplomas.
Well, now that I got the microphone, I'll let go. Let's keep passing back and forth between us. But when we observed this at Higher as well, and some of the comments from Maryland, there's this behavior change, but career development, career planning, if it happens, seemingly often happens on the periphery as part of something that was intentional, integrated, just like all the other core subject areas. So it's probably no surprise that there's this real disconnect between what students are studying and what they're learning, and not having a clear notion about what's going to come next, because we haven't fundamentally created structures that lead that to happen. It sometimes happens something like serendipity, but it hasn't been systematized in a way that it could be. I think it would be a much less overwhelming process for students if we started that earlier and it was more sustained and consistent as opposed to, and both Jasons are dating himself a little bit, but as opposed to a series of disconnected standalone events. It's not a career development process, it's a series of career one-offs, sort of, and that's, I'm giving a really broad brush, I'm sure it's more coherent in some places, but across the board, I don't think we can honestly say that we start with the end in line, we help students start with a broad array and narrow from there, so that by the end of high school, they have a pretty good sense, at a minimum, of what's not right, but likely, they have a good sense of what is right as well. We're saying that.
Just wanted to get clarification. If you ask me again, what role does credentials play in all of this? Was that your original question?
Yeah, what I was hearing was that, I thought what I was hearing was, it really was going to some, how do we credential students, particularly in the career areas that we were hearing? And I didn't have, and that's not necessarily the right terminology, not necessarily, it becomes semantics because we use it as Alan said, we use pathways in all kinds of different discussions, right? So what does it look like?
So we're just brainstorming.
What's that?
We're just brainstorming. This is interesting. When we were at the Hillsville, we tried to be very mindful about talking to the industry, and one of their comments, I guess a common theme in the comments was we were really trying to drive certifications and stuff that we thought were really recognized by industry. We were kind of surprised that when we heard back that what we believed was not always the reality. For example, in automotive, when we would try to connect with particular automotive companies, because we want them to have certain skills, we'd rather interview them, and then we're going to put them through the board training or the, you know, I don't know how you ever did that same kind of feedback. We heard the same sometimes in manufacturing with some of the companies that were in the Noblesville area that we'd rather hire candidates and start training them. So I just wanted to throw that out. Sometimes I believe our chasing certifications, I don't ultimately know how important those are, and if they vary from industry to industry, but they're certainly not all recognized at a common level.
Which then plays to Jennifer's point, that maybe the certification that we're having trouble in some cases getting them across, it isn't really what's necessary,
And
right?
when I talk to employers, they say, I want them to show up, I want them to pass the drug screen, I want them to get along with their coworkers. They never say, did they pass algebra 2? That never has been said to me, and I understand the difference, and some students need algebra 2, so I'm not belittling algebra 2. But when I talk to most employers, they're like, can they work with people? Can they show up? Are they defiant? I mean, you're talking very basic social skills, very basic, you know, their habits at home. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people, like the drug issue in Indiana, the drug screen issue is a huge problem for CDL, for somebody in the health profession. So we're hearing the same message a lot, and you're exactly right. It doesn't always talk about credentialing, although it comes up. They're talking about just basic skills that all of us at the table obviously have, but many of our kids really struggle with, and not just kids, adults. I mean, so the workforce is struggling in a different area right now that we're hearing this about.
Janet, and then I know Senator Cruz had a comment as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that credentialing can mean a lot of different things, right? And so it could mean an industry recognized certification, you know, in AWS welding or CPT, certified production technician, and maybe some manufacturers value that and some don't. So again, that's where I think that the conversations with employers need to come into play. And I know for a fact that there are some regional differences around, even within a sector, an industry sector, who values what certification. I do think, however, a couple of things are important, and like Dr. McCormick just said, that sort of that work ethic. And so, you know, the expansion of the governor's work ethic certification and gaining buy-in from employers through that, I think is going to be really important. But also, the earlier, again, that we can connect students to the workforce while they're in high school and kind of making those decisions on not what they're going to study, but how they're going to live, I think is really important. And so when they can see a benefit, they're doing a paid internship, they're seeing what those job requirements are, that they need to get up, they need to go to work, and, you know, maybe other decisions on, you know, whether or not they're going to stay up all night, it could help them. In fact, we know that data shows that, right? But also in terms of credentialing, credential could be a Vincent's or Ivy Tech certificate or technical certificate, again, that then eventually could be stackable to higher degrees that align to the industry sectors and then the local employer needs, not necessarily an industry certification.
I think it's pretty clear to everyone around the table that greater connection, greater exposure to employers earlier has got to be considered in this thing between the student themselves are at this point. That's Strata does or reality happens. And as it turns out, the most trusted source of information from students is employers. It's not necessarily parents, it's not necessarily school counselors, it's not necessarily the people who are expecting to deliver this information. Of course, the downside of that is most of our students don't have that access to employers. So this is clearly going to have to be loophole to figure out how we can integrate not just career planning as part of the core curriculum, but integrate exposure to direct exposure and engagement with employers.
I think when we look at the certificates, I think it should be a broad scope and not narrow. And I think that we need those certificates to have meaning to the person who takes that course. So if I want to be a truck driver, then I don't know how long the truck driver course is, if it's 6 months or 6 weeks, whatever it is, that's meaningful to that employer who, you know, I see in the back of all these semis driving up and down 69, you know, we need new truck drivers, you know, call this number. So there evidently is a big need for that, but they have to go through training and then they get their license, the CDL license. And so there are, I think, a lot of different places out there in our workplace that need some kind of meaningful certificate that'll help that person get that job and that training to have that job. And I think it needs to have some kind of recognition. So in addition to being meaningful, I think there needs to be some, I don't know if you call it industry recognition, education field recognition, or whatever, but somebody out there ought to say this is a recognized certificate that we think is good for education purposes as well as employment. I think one of the key things for people to get employed today is to have good attitudes and to also have good character qualities. Jennifer touched on that a little bit, but a lot of the jobs today are on-the-job training, and I think if a person, and I think we lack in our school, our whole education system of preparing somebody to show up on time or whatever it is. I remember my brother went to law school, and he got out of law school, he came in, and we had office space for him, so he comes in our office space and he sets up, I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, he went through law school and went through undergrad school, and no one told him how to file a case at the courthouse, how to deal with a client who walks in, and how do you deal with him, and how do you, what files do you need, what kind of secretarial assistance do you need. You know, just take it, go through college for 7 years and no one told you how to actually do your job. You just had all academic stuff, basically. So I think the practical side is important, that we do things that are going to help students succeed. And I still remember the Midwest Higher Education Compact meeting I went to, it's been several years back, with a guy, Isaac, or what's the guy from Minnesota's name? Larry Isaacson or something. And I still remember he started, this is for higher education, all the colleges in like 17 states. He got up and he said, we need to have our colleges actually teach for student success, not for the college success. Whatever that means, we got to do what it takes to have that student succeed in their life. Once they get out of whatever training they're in, is that training actually preparing them, just the case of my brother's a lawyer, what can you do to actually do that profession right out on the job? And I think a lot of training goes back to Fort Wayne Metals. They want people who are going to be hard workers, are going to be diligent in their work, are going to be accurate in their work, get along with people. Jennifer said, those skills are, I think, almost essential value for any success. So we talk about a lot of education, academic things, but I think we've got to also remember the practical side of what it takes to actually succeed in the job. And I think those soft skills oftentimes are neglected, and I think they're just about equal to any academic preparation, is that you just have good attitudes and good character qualities.
Context. I agree. I think I hear a lot of that from community partners, the soft skills. Kids don't know that it's not okay to be on your cell phone all day while you're at work, or that it is important to show up on time, to dress appropriately. And I think as we're looking at credentials or pathways, even just starting at, if I'm going into the military, or I'm going on to a post-secondary institution, or I'm going into the workforce or a technical trade, what are those key skills that all 4 of those paths might need, but then each individual path, what are the, beyond academics, beyond certification of a license, what are those skills that we need, and then how do we build that into high school education and junior high education, and I think we need to start in elementary school even with sometimes, and getting kids thinking into just what does my citizenship look like, what does my employability look like?
I would just add on the discussion of certifications and what that kind of credential means at the end. I think it's easy to gravitate towards those things because they're easy to measure, right? When the kid passes the test, it gets that piece of paper, we can point to it and count it. But I also don't think that, let's take a machinist, for example. The kid goes through 2 semesters of machining, becomes a good machinist, but can't pass the test. I would say in my experience, many of the employers may not necessarily care that much about that piece of paper. They care about the kid's skills. So if he has those skills and he can get that job and make a good wage, he's happy, the employer's happy. I don't think we should put ourselves in a position where that's a failure. That's a good thing for Indiana as a whole. The kid's making a good wage, the employer has the employee he needs. So I would hate to see us box ourselves into only counting those kind of things when there's value in the kid getting the skills, even if he can't pass the test or get that piece of paper.
If I can take it back there, I think the most powerful thing today was Janice speaking being staff. I think our end goal is to look at pathways is to have students that are college or career ready. We have to celebrate those who are eligible and equally, because we don't do that right now. We celebrate the kids that get into their IU, we're excited about those things. We need to celebrate equally those students who are making a whole bunch of money, working for months. But those stackable skills, think about things that we can control. Those stackable skills, to your point exactly, I can't fathom a situation where if that student receives a certificate, it's not referenced in any industry, that he's not a better student, which is our goal. I'm not saying he's where he needs to be, but I'm saying that he is a better student than he was before he got that certificate. And we need to recognize that and make that as broad as we can, working with the chamber, in my opinion, to reverse engineer what are those skills that we're going to sit there and what skills do we need, and how can we work those into our area pathways and rewards students and schools for addressing those pieces that we know are.
Another thing, I think, in talking to a lot of students and even teachers and employers, students never go visit factories, basically. Well, I shouldn't say never, but seldom. So they don't even consider working in a factory where they can make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and now it's not a dirty dust bowl like it used to be. A lot of these factories are as clean as you can be. Go to that metal, metal, it's a very clean, good atmosphere to work in. It's not, even an auto mechanic today used to go to the garage at the auto mechanic place was all dirty and oil and grease and everything all over. You go there now, you can almost eat off the floor in a car maintenance shop now. But kids don't get that exposure. They don't get out there and get into the workplace of where these jobs are. And I think that's a real shortage that we have. And kind of goes with what you were just saying there on we got to teach a career, and how do they even know if they've never walked into a factory in their whole life? They probably aren't ever going to think about going to a factory and work, even though it's a good job and good conditions today. So I think somehow we got to get the kids exposed. I know in our in Gallup High School we have I think it's a health services deal where you do a half a day for it's 12 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is, but you go out and they have about 12 different places. You have a doctor's office, a hospital, wherever the different places are, and they go out and work, for 5 or a week, maybe a week at each one of those places for 10 weeks, whatever. And a lot of them end up deciding, I don't want these 4 or 5, but I might consider these 2 or 3, and I might major in this in school and get a certificate for this. So somehow we got to get the students connected to the jobs that are out there, and they're good jobs as well.
There are a lot of schools sitting empty during the summer with very expensive equipment or training sitting there idle. And so as a department, I would love to partner with DWD, so tell Commissioner Brawley his money. But we are looking at how do you ramp those up in the summer. It would be a win-win. You're paying teachers, they're after the money. Kids could be exposed and have a better opportunity. But sometimes, like I said, it's hard to get in during the school year, but during the summer, there's a great time that we can take advantage of that and share some important resources. And I know Ivy Tech and BU have a great partner in this as well, but I really think for us in the K-12 world, there's a lot of downtime in the summer that we can maybe capitalize on and just look at things a little differently and pull some resources. So those conversations are starting to happen, but we have all tried forever to do everything well. We need to start looking at it regionally, and I know that's what innovation centers are. I know that's what many of our high schools are doing. But boy, those summer months are a missed opportunity right now for much of what we're talking about.
So I hear a lot of discussion about, the truck drivers and the need to hire more truck drivers, which I totally agree with. We have an incredible infrastructure in logistics. We're in manufacturing. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the fact that Indiana as a state, because of our reliance on manufacturing and because of our concentration of industries that are disproportionately impacted through regulation, we have jobs that I think are potentially more vulnerable than some other types of jobs based on what trends we're seeing in the country right now. And so when you think about this at a macro level, basically what's happening is the demand for highly educated people that study specific fields is going up at a very rapid clip, more aggressively than any point in American history. And the supply of people with that level of education has been pretty steady. It's been, 1% upticks, if you will. So that's creating high wage premiums. So people who are highly educated with specific types of degrees make 81% more than a person with a high school diploma. Most economists think that number should be about 46% as a reasonable return on going to school for 4 years, getting a certain kind of degree. That just means that demand's outstripping supply. But then at the same time, we're losing these lower skilled roles to trade and to automation and to technology. So the Rexnord jobs, the carrier jobs that we've been talking a lot about as a society. And we've seen a pretty steady supply of people with the educational attainment needed to complete those jobs. So what should happen is wages should go down, actually. And that gap between the highly educated demand curve and supply and the less education demand curve and supply creates this income inequality as a country. And I think in the last few years, this has become very evident through different types of movements. I think we've seen this coming to light. And so I say all this just to say that I think if you look, for instance, at automation replacing manufacturing roles, I've seen some reports that show that some of the highest of the 20 regions in the country that are purchasing robotics that would basically take the place of manufacturing roles, 4 of those regions are in Indiana, of the 20 highest. And so I do think we need to be cautious about saying that, I totally agree that a good job should be rewarded, but I do think we need to be looking to the future and asking ourselves as a state from a public policy perspective, where are we headed? And how do we prepare aggressively for that? And how do we get really aggressive about the public policy approach we're going to take to prepare? Because I do think these trends are not going to slow down. I think they're going to speed up. That's my personal take anyway.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And aspirational, 30% of our economy is manufacturing and 20% of our workforce. And we have a critical issue right now. And so it is what it is, and we need the businesses in manufacturing to stay in India.
And I would just ask, what's the tension there between filling an immediate need and forecasting out to the future? And how do you balance out these challenges? Because I totally agree, these are great jobs, they pay great wages.
Yeah.
But then there's a question of, are those jobs more vulnerable to larger trends in the economy as a function of technology and automation
Well,
and
I
trade?
think a plant is more vulnerable to automation if they can't find people to do the jobs today.
I totally agree with that.
absolutely Yeah.
So one of the things, I wanted to back up to Jason and to Senator Cruz on you spurred another thought. So I also was hearing the experience piece of this right as well, right? So I'll pose another question. Is work experience a pathway?
I personally think it's the best. I think most of the most successful people in America today would go back and they started having a lemonade stand or a paper route or whatever it was that they shovel snow, sidewalks. Those people were out doing things and kind of being little mini entrepreneurs when they were 10, 12, 15, 17 years old. And they were thinking that way. I think work is one of the best things you can do for a kid. And that's one of the things we lack, I think, a lot of times today. And that's why we have a lot of these illegal aliens coming in our country to have these jobs, because our kids don't want to work. And, we need to be doing all we can to have a work ethic taught in our schools, that these kids in the summers need to go out and do something that they can make some money and learn some trade. There's a company, Group Deco, is in my area, and they have a lighting manufacturing company where they make light fixtures. And they started a program themselves. They just initiated it as their own, where they went to the schools, public schools in their area, said, we want kids at sophomore, junior, and senior years that are interested. They come in for a 6 weeks program in the summer. They're in, depending on their age and what they can do. Sometimes they just observe or watch, and they go to a different department each day or whatever. But they're discovering that those kids that stay and do that 3 summers, sophomore, junior, senior years, they're hiring a good number of those people, and they're working there because they've had the training for 3 summers for 6 weeks. They like the kid, they discern which kid has the right attitudes and the work ethic and those kind of things, and they're hiring them. So they're actually doing their own apprenticeship training, and then they pick out the best ones and hire them, and they got a career there at that factory. I think that's a good program for the businesses to actually get the people into their factories and let the kids, or not even factories, just offices too, just to see what goes on a work day and how people work.
2 years ago, our high school diploma task force, one of the recommendations that, and Jason, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there really wasn't, there's a lot said about from that group, but I think everybody agrees that having a work-based learning component as a graduation capstone requirement, and everybody, there was consensus, I believe, on that for the most part. And, the key is, what is that going to look like? I don't want to send kids necessarily to go work at McDonald's. I want them to have something that aligns to what their future career path may be. But I think that's a fantastic idea, and it's a symbiotic relationship for the businesses as well, because I keep talking about the importance of internships and apprenticeships, and it's the easiest way to grow your own workforce. You're training them during this period of time so that when they graduate, they are ready to go. So I think that having some sort of work and learn component as a pathway, or as part of a pathway, is extremely important. I would wholeheartedly support that idea.
Thanks for reminding us, Carol. Yes, we all agree that as a capstone experience, that would be good, but for the 4-year degree pathway person, that kind of internship, work-based learning experience cannot take away from the academic preparation. So there has to be a way to not have it be one or the other, but in addition to, I don't know how you do it in the school day, but as a capstone, yes, we would be very supportive of that.
I thought Purdue University had a program where in their sophomore year, they went out and they had their fall semester at the college campus, and in the spring semester they went out and worked at a job, kind of like an apprenticeship job. In the beginning semester of the junior year, they were back on the campus, and they went out.
Yes.
And I don't know how many people in the last time I knew, every one of them got a job right out of graduation out of Purdue. And generally, one of those, they either went to the same guy for 3 years, or they switched back and forth, and one of those employers hired those people. Then a high percentage of do you know what that program's called?
The Purdue Co-op program.
Purdue Co-op
The
program.
long-standing.
I think that ought to be used in
Right.
more areas and more places.
But it takes longer to graduate, to
Yes,
get your.
but it's worth it if you got a
Yes,
job.
yes, definitely.
And then what do you talk about the student teaching?
I think going back to what we do, I think exactly, I think the exposure that the students have earlier in a teaching program, and every program I know now does it, and becomes freshman. They want to put you in this building to make sure, is this what you want to do? I mean, is this where you're passionate? Is this what you want to do? And I think we need to recognize as far as grad pathways, that yes, the rigor for the students, those 4-year degrees, the kids that get into Purdue, those kids need to have that rigor. But we also have students, on Senator's point, that can't get into it. So what is their pathway going to look like? And I think it's your point to make that as least restrictive as it can. Not only, we don't want to change the pathway for students that you're getting. I think that pathway has proven to be successful. But what additional pathways can we do to those kids that can't get involved? What are we going to do with those kids to make sure that they have a pathway to success? I think is the question that this board is asked.
Can I talk about the capstone? I don't think you'll find any K-12, or you would be hard pressed to find K-12 people who don't agree with that concept. But where would you go in Randolph County? Where would you go? You're going to McDonald's, you're going to Rivers, you're hoping, well, they would have had a business that just shut down. So in many of those areas, your schools are your largest employer. And then you have transportation issues for many of our students. How are you going to get in there? And then some of the businesses are very worried about the age of the child who's going into visits or to work or to get that experience. So there's some layers there that many schools have been successful, but it depends sometimes on the pocket of the state that you're in, because that can be very limiting. I think everyone would be for that capstone, but how we define that, we're going to have to get our schools involved if we go that way. And I know that's not the perfect answer, but even in Delaware County, where there are 90+ high schools, you're trying to place all those high school students, believe me, they're going to be McDonald's. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's not good, and that's not what we want to do, but that's somewhat the reality of some of the capstone ideas. Great idea, you're not going to find too much pushback, but the reality piece of how do you scale that? And so where have those pilots been successful? And many schools are already doing it, but the ones who can't, it's because it's something they don't want to, it's very difficult. So not that I'm trying to, it can, I mean, I think it needs to be explored more, but there are some real realities that make that very difficult.
And just like to add on to what Dr. Cormier said, I think it's great, and I'm excited by some of the blue skying and opportunities we have, but I think we have to remember what we come up with. Can we staff it? Can we resource it? And can counselors manage it? And I think that's got to be in the back of our minds as we explore all the kind of exciting opportunities.
I think part of what the capstone piece concept and is working towards, being able to have a job and having some of the soft skills that come, learning some of those pieces. I wouldn't want you folks to forget about that there are other places within our schools that aren't going to have the problem finding a placement that do some of that as well. That becomes a lot of your extracurricular. Teach the students the same kinds of skills that they don't necessarily have to go out to, and the issues of transportation, other kinds of things are taken care of, from your music, your athletics, the drama, the variety of skills that are learned there that are extremely valuable along the lines, and those aren't forgotten. And the way in which you structure a pathway could limit students in terms of their ability to do those kinds of activities. And part of this is my own field and my own work, but one of the places that there's data that suggests that of females that are in executive positions, 85% of them participated in athletics either in high school or college. Now think about that in terms of that process. And so some of those pieces we forget sometimes about those extracurriculars, and we push so hard, and I understand, and rightfully so, with math skills and English skills and the science skills and things that are there. But there's a lot of learning that takes place. You take someone in an athletic standpoint, and one of the reasons that people are successful is you learn how to lose. And you learn that it's not the end of the world. That we just go back and we change what we're doing and trying to get better every time we move forward. It takes dedication, it takes teamwork, it takes responsibility. Those are all the things that you folks are looking for, and we tend to forget that those are important parts of that educational process. That if you get too prescriptive or try to put too many things on, that you limit the ability to participate in those kinds of things, and those are such rich opportunities that they tend not to get any other time after high school's over.
That is a drop the mic comment. Drop the mic. Thank you, John.
I'm reminded that one of the things we're doing today is talking about options, really, multiple pathways. And there are so many comments that I want to respond to. I think the first question was about jobs. And right off the bat, that as a parent, right? See just what comes from the job, whether it's related to anything at school or not, and all of the soft skills that my own kids have picked up, and it wasn't necessarily at school, and sometimes there are just things that jobs teach you that you don't learn in the classroom. But more to the topic of work-based learning, Susan, I think heard you say something to the impact of, we want to make sure it doesn't get in the way of the academics for those who are going on to college or whatever, but I guess it would challenge that thinking because I think that's the trouble we've got ourselves in here is thinking it's either or. It's not either or. And even in academics, and I happen to be sitting by a project legally teacher, which is a pathway my kids have gone through, and I would challenge that it's one of the most rigorous pathways in my kids' high school. But what I loved was the embedded capstone experience where they were forced to go out and partner and to work with the industry. I worked with a cardiologist, had to witness heart surgery. I mean, I can't imagine getting that kind of opportunity in high school. And on the other spectrum, I have a kid who's always going to struggle with academics, but is in a great welding program and is earning certifications and got to weld this summer. And I feel a little bit passionate with this discussion because he's never going to pass PCA. He's got a lot of challenges that way, but he's in a pathway. He is progressing. He's worked in jobs, and so I want to put out there that at every level where you're talking about college bound or work bound, there are great benefits to be gained from those work-based learning experiences that no matter what pathway you are in, CTE, direct, very academic or work bound, there's a lot of value in those. And I was trying to remember, Jim, because we were talking about areas where kids won't have as much access, to places to go for. And I've been around visiting CTE centers, and I can't think of where I was, but there are some companies who are experimenting with some virtual work-based learning opportunities as well. So I just wanted to.
Indiana Internet is, they have a lot of virtual internships that are available to students.
And Ben, your thoughts? Ben, actually, your thoughts parallel what my thoughts were when I asked for the mic, and that is going back a little bit earlier in the conversation. We're building pathways for different pathways, and again, valuing pathways, valuing all those pathways. We're not building pathways for students who just cannot get into a traditional post-secondary track that we most all likely took that path. That's not better than a student who wants to be an electrician, who might be the valedictorian of a high school and wants to be an electrician, comes to our Career Center, completes our program, and at the same time has work-based learning opportunities, is enrolled in a federal apprenticeship program, completes 2 years of the federal apprenticeship program by completing our program, graduates from high school, completes the next 2 years of the federal apprenticeship program, and now is a journeyman electrician. That's a quality career plan, and that is not a second choice, that's a first choice. So that's the thing when I say value, it's just guarding, it's not a value all those training plans based on their career choice. So,
Can I just, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, I think maybe we don't. We're basically learning, yes, but we're really focused on applying transferable skills, right? And that can look a lot of different ways. Recognizing that a traditional internship-like opportunity might work really well in one context in one part of the state, but it might not work really well in other parts of the lot of different models, a lot of different approaches that we can consider to make this not just a loose tracking, but something that actually very implementable by folks there.
That's almost exactly what I was going to say. And yes, and it was also going to connect sort of, I think it was Roy earlier, kind of how might we, and it was around competency-based education to some extent earlier, right? Isn't that what you're sort of talking about, you know, and how we might be able to get, Susan, all of the highly qualified, educated students that she needs, right, who have the honors diploma and have all of the skills to succeed at Purdue, but it might not take as much time as we think, right? And then also, how can we integrate some of the high-quality application experiences that Jason was just talking about, and it doesn't have to be in a factory. And so, you know, how can we integrate some of those experiences into these pathways? I think that that's really critical to include.
I just want to add that at our school that we're from, we are a rural area, but 60% of our seniors go out on internships. And we have a flexible staff that they go out one day a week. And so they know that they have to make that miss work. And sometimes it is hard to place if you want to be a nurse student and you know you are not to have career to go on to college. But they may not be able to intern, but they will find something in the hospital setting maybe, if nothing else, that leads to perhaps a summer job where they can develop those soft skills that's needed. So I guess you just gotta sometimes think outside the box when you're doing these internships.
So that seems to be a spot here where we can move into being respectful of your time and hit the time frame that we said. What I would like to do is just pause here, and for those collaborators that are here, and one, I think this has been an incredible discussion, and I think we have some direction as to some areas and ways that we can go. I want to give collaborators a chance, anything that's still on your mind, or gosh, I wish I would have said that, or what, I guess those are the things you think about when you're driving home. But is there anything left that you really want us to think about on this? Thanks, Susan. I was hoping there would be some.
I don't need a microphone, but again, as you know, I'm representing a four-year institution, so my comments reflect that. So if you create a pathway for a four-year college-bound student or two-year transferable kind of student, think about the use of the SAT or ACT and making that mandatory during the school day. And we find, and other states are experiencing that, you know, students who might not have thought of themselves as college-bound think of themselves that way when they take the test and they get the score back. You know, and it leads to other things. So that's one thing. I don't think we talked a lot about SAT, ACT today, but I would encourage that. But also, a structural question for you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe the members of this committee is in determining how many pathways. You started by saying there are multiple pathways, but a lot of the discussion today has been college or career training ready, you know. So beyond that, what would you see as other pathways? Are you going to get into specific career areas? I guess that was my other question earlier. And how that then reflects if it's a student needing a career credential in that versus a college degree in that area. So there's so many ways this discussion could go in terms of the number of pathways, and we stand ready to help and assist, and we're glad you've had higher ed at the table today.
And I think, and again, when we go back to the legislation, it gives a lot of mays that are possible there. And to the point, you know, I hate the or stuff a lot of times, right? It's and how many can we have? And the first one that comes to mind when you say that would even be military, for example, because we have a lot of students that is what they want, right? And to Alan's point, it isn't about sometimes, and to BJ's point, it isn't always about, could I get into Purdue? I really don't want to go to Purdue. Right? I can't believe I just said that. Right? But I mean, you know what I mean, though. It isn't necessarily, I can't, I don't want to, because I want to be an electrician, right? And so I think that's, so I think the possibilities are, I'm not going to say endless, because boy, would that be hard to implement, right? But I think that's what we're exploring.
But it's almost within that pathway of military. I have a son who's going to be, well, he's a senior today, it's his first day, a senior in high school. He wants to go the military route, but he wants to go to college first. So there's, different ways within that military pathway to get there that you have to remember too.
Right. Absolutely. Lots of difference. It's almost like, how do you create a pathway that's not a path? How's that that's horrible if somebody wants to tweet that.
Access opportunities, that frames a lot of this that we haven't discussed.
Yeah, and then how do we make sure that every child has an opportunity to do that? Is that what you're?
Well, it can't be an endless, we can't have pathways that are endless. You have to have pathways that the same student in Randolph County or in Cass County has in Marion County. So if you set it up so that in Marion County, we have 8 pathways to a diploma, the same diploma, in Cass County, we have 3 really. That is a huge reality legally. It's also, if you look at equity, not that that's equal, but you look at the equity issue. So there are some things here that will be barriers, unfortunately, but I think the creativity comes in the pathways, so that we're not carving out, like these kids will have an opportunity to get 3 of these, but they can get 1. Well, that's a disservice to kids. So I think that's a huge piece of the conversation that we will have to keep in mind as a family to say, how do we have equal access to equity for kids? And that's going to be tricky. I think it can be done within those pathways. That's why the defining of the pathway will be interesting.
And the regionalization that we talked about as well. How do you regionalize, but yet get to that point too, right? It is an interesting point. Anyone else?
And one of the things that's been kind of mentioned a little bit, but I think as you think through this, that I heard, that I kind of want to have you think about as you're ending this meeting, is to make sure that the teacher education aspects of this becomes in play, because I think it gets back to something that you said, Jennifer, in this regard. You're going to have the people who can do whatever it is that you're coming forward to put together, and how do you partner with a teacher's college like ours or others to be able to talk then about how are we going to deliver this? And I think that has to be part of the conversation. You can build and you can have the Xbox trigonometry game, but somebody has to create that. And so the concept may be really good, but who are the people who are going to help create that and carry it out? So make sure that as you go forward, that you're not leaving out the education, the teacher education aspect of trying to figure out how all that fits in.
Anyone else?
Yeah, that relates back to my meeting the other night, because the people around the table were saying, is there a license to create the kind of teacher needed to deliver a program to educate people to go into those industries? And there really isn't now, but there is a process for it. And so the question is, how quickly could that be ramped up and support for it garnered?
Anyone else? So one of the last things that we have on the agenda, we'll have a little fun here. One of the last things on the agenda was values, and not to come out with a value statement, but what I think would be valuable to us coming out of this meeting, and I'm going to want to do this in some form or another, every one of these. I would like to just go around the table. So I am going to put you on the spot. That's the teacher in me, cold column here. But everybody's had these, so this is going to be easy for you. I would like for you to give us, moving forward, what are the things from today that we really need to value as we put this together? In your opinion, from the context that you're from, or anything, what would be a value that we need to move forward with this? Does that make sense? But what would be the value that you would move forward? Alan, I'm going to put you on the spot because I just know you're always thinking, so I know you'll be able to lead us off. We just passed the mic and it made it happen.
It's kind of a little bit like the stuck record, as I've already said it a couple of times. I think we should be cautious or be aware and cognizant that, about all different career training paths and value them all equally, not that there's a better one and a second choice, but value all those career paths based upon the career objective.
I think the key word for me still is flexibility, and especially is how student background, need, and desire informs that.
I think my key word would be opportunity, and I think students in my part of the state, Southwest Indiana, should have the same opportunities. Teachers should have opportunities to instruct, how they see fit, especially in their areas.
I echo the flexibility and balancing that flexibility with rigor. I also would also talk about the manageability, how implementable the pathways are to the diverse schools around the diverse geographic state.
I would, and this fits into the flexibility, but making sure that whatever decisions are made do not limit people in the future, that because of the decision that they made now cuts off their opportunities as they move forward because of that.
Value ways to respond quickly to changes.
Very consistent, allows students to explore and maintain as many options for as long as possible in the curriculum, and then provide implementation support to those that need to be championing the students in those options.
I would say one of the big opportunities for local communities, especially those struggling and losing population, to retain young, talented people is to connect high school graduates with local opportunities. So my value would be empowering local level decision making and flexibility to tie those students directly with local job opportunities.
Ditto. Local, flexible, and definitely have employers as part of the solution.
Value the differences that we have in our students. I used to teach at a comprehensive high school, Jennifer knows, where we had miracle workers dealing with students with severe and profound learning difficulties, and at the same time we had teachers working with students who were going to score 1,600 on the SAT. Let's make a place for all of them in these pathways.
I think two things. One is that student experiential learning piece, and then having employers at the table throughout the development process.
So just say practical. I think we should look in a reasoned way at what is going to create the best outcomes for students and for employers and for the broader good as a virtue of that.
For me, I'm keeping a list of everyone in their comments, but clarity for the students. Try not to get so bogged down in the details that we forget the student understanding of all of this. And so student choice has to be a big factor in that. The equal access, as the superintendent said, and the valuing of the two different kinds of pathways or more is very important.
There are two for me. We need to be mindful of individual desires and, of course, regional needs, but that the outcomes of this group need to make sure that we have responsible preparation for whatever path the students have chosen.
Most of my hard work inside the employer input, making sure that there's, providing the end output would be some sort of valuable currency for the student, and as well as what Susan said is, let's not make this too difficult, let's make this simple and concise.
Flexibility, again, the student makes a choice for freshman year, they have flexibility, they change their mind as a junior year.
I'm just kind of thinking of this cliche that one size doesn't fit all, so I'm really valuing the possibility of multiple pathways for student success.
Or have any original thoughts on the side of the table. And some level we're really trying to systems change, right? And that's hard, particularly the people who are sitting in position today. But I would just urge us to not let those initial short-term capacity implementation challenges make us create ultimately student-centered exercise. We should think about the opportunity such that these career equity opportunity for our students.
And
And for me, it's just been a nice reminder of, because of the complexity and because of what's on the line, the commitment this is going to take from everybody. And we cannot allow governance structures to get in the way.
I think that we need to, I want to go back to the certificates and having them be meaningful and recognizable by industry and business. That's one of our main things today as far as business emphasis.
I think mine had a couple. I think, first of all, the flexibility. We want to give the students as long as we can figure out what do you want your graduate life to be, but at some point, those students have to make a decision. And a realistic decision based on the experiences that they've already had. And the second one, I think we have to go to, I'll go back to chamber again. But I think that we need to reverse engineer our needs as to what are the forecast needs for Indiana, what are the current needs for Indiana, and how can we put students into those positions, because that is the ultimate goal of education. How are we going to give you a better life? I guarantee that you're one college or two, any career ready, that you're going to have a chance to be successful.
Always do what I ask people to do. Mine is to think of, and this has been an underlying in all of these, but is every kid. How do we get to every kid? You know, I go back to, my thought as you were thinking, I went back to my son standing there in front of the lamp this morning as he starts his junior year. And I'm thinking, gosh, he fits into some of these things, and where does he fit? You know, what does he want to do? You know, and it isn't exactly in some of these places that we put him. So how do we get to every kid and be able to have them have a pathway, every student have a pathway? How do we be that broad? How do we make that work for them?
I guess it's hard to be last. Data-driven, competency-based, and not propping them to status quo.
Nice.
Concise.
So, one, I just want to again echo some of you said this, what a great conversation. What a great starting point for this as well, because I think we have more than we might think we have right at the moment. And in fact, as I started to look at this, and I think we've got to a great place here. For collaborators, the one thing I do want you to know, you will be involved as we go through this. You're going to be receiving the information from this. I don't have a mouse in my pocket, Alicia will make sure that you have this. And we want you to look at, when we send you the information from today and a recap of that, please react to it. We will want that. And we will seek your input as we continue through this process as well. And every conversation, as you know, has been set up with different groups so that we can get to a different place as we are. And I appreciate the value of continue to include employers, continue to include higher education, which we will be, and that we need to do that. And so we will value that as we move forward. So again, thank you very much to the panel. We will have things for you as well. We have and the next ones are as well. August 22nd is the next meeting. That'll be an interesting day. A panel meeting and a board meeting in the same day. Wow, that's exciting. So with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting, and with, again, great thanks to all of you.
I'm looking forward to schedule this, and then it's like, it's a wait till.
Yeah, exactly.